August 20th, 2007. Jedediah Island, British Columbia. A 12-year-old girl is walking along the beach when she spots a blue and white running shoe. It's a men's size 12. She picks it up, thinking it's trash. But when she looks closer, she realizes there's something inside. A human foot, still in the shoe. The bones are there, perfectly preserved inside the sneaker. 6 days later, another
foot washes up on Gabriola Island, about 30 miles away. Then another on Valdes Island, then Kirkland Island. By early 2008, 5 feet have been found, and they keep coming. Over the next 15 years, at least 21 detached human feet in shoes wash ashore around the Salish Sea, the waters between British Columbia and Washington State. No bodies, just feet, all in sneakers except one.
In a hiking boot. And the internet goes absolutely wild with theories. Serial killers, human traffickers, plane crashes, tsunami victims, even aliens. But the truth, when scientists finally figured it out, is somehow even stranger than the conspiracy theories. The Salish Sea isn't actually a sea in the traditional sense. It's a complex network of waterways that includes the Strait of Georgia, the Strait of Juan de Fuca,
and Puget Sound. It stretches nearly 500 miles from Olympia, Washington, up to Desolation Sound in British Columbia. It's an inland ocean connected to the Pacific but partially enclosed, creating unique conditions. The area is gorgeous, dense forests, rocky beaches, islands everywhere. Major cities like Seattle and Vancouver sit on its shores. But it's also cold. The water temperature rarely gets above 55 degrees, and that matters.
For what happens to bodies that end up in the water? When the feet started appearing in 2007, people immediately suspected foul play. Multiple feet showing up in the same area over just a few months? That had to be connected, right? Media coverage exploded. Major international newspapers ran stories. David Letterman joked about it on his late-night show. The speculation got wild. Some thought it was a serial killer with a foot fetish. Others suggested organized crime using the Salish Sea as a dumping ground. One theory claimed plane crash victims. Another insisted they were bodies from the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami that had drifted across the entire Pacific. The hoaxes started almost immediately. Pranksters stuffed shoes with chicken bones or dog paws and left them on beaches. In 2008, someone planted a fake foot made from an animal paw stuffed in a sock and shoe with dried seaweed. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police had to investigate. The mystery had become so famous that people were actively trying to add to it. But here's what was actually happening. When a body ends up in cold ocean water, it usually sinks. That's especially true if the person drowned.
Because their lungs fill with water, the body settles on the sea floor, and then the scavengers arrive. Crabs, lobsters, fish, shrimp. Forensic scientist Gail Anderson from Simon Fraser University studied this using pig carcasses as stand-ins for human bodies. She found that in the Salish Sea's conditions, arthropods can completely skeletonize and disarticulate a body in just 4 days. They start with the softer tissues, the orifices.
the joints, including the ankles. The ankle is one of the weaker joints in the human body when it comes to staying connected underwater. It's mostly held together by soft tissue, ligaments, tendons, skin. When those decompose or get eaten away by sea life, the foot separates from the leg pretty easily. This happens to bodies in water all over the world. Feet detach, hands detach. But here's
where modern footwear comes in. Before the 2000s, shoes were heavier. They didn't float well. If a foot separated from a body underwater, the shoe would sink along with it. But modern running shoes changed everything. Starting in the 1990s and accelerating through the 2000s, shoe companies started using lighter materials, foam soles, air pockets in the heels and midsoles for cushioning. These design changes
Made shoes more comfortable. They also made them extremely buoyant. A human foot in a modern running shoe basically becomes a personal flotation device. When the foot detaches from the leg underwater, the shoe brings it to the surface. The shoe also protects the bones inside from further decomposition. It's like a little capsule. So you've got feet floating around in the Salish Sea. But why don't they
just drift out to the Pacific? Why do they all end up on beaches in this one specific area? That's where the oceanography gets interesting. Parker McCready, a professor at the University of Washington, built a computer simulation of the Salish Sea's currents, tides, and wind patterns. He found that the Salish Sea acts like a trap. It's a large inland body of water with only narrow connections
to the open ocean. The prevailing winds are westerlies, meaning they blow from west to east. Objects floating on the surface get pushed by the wind even more than by currents, so anything floating in the Salish Sea tends to get pushed toward shore rather than out to sea. The wind catches that little bit of the shoe that sticks above the water and basically guarantees it'll eventually wash up on a beach. DNA analysis provided answers. The British Columbia Coroner Service compared DNA from the feet to databases of missing persons. They identified most of them, and what they found was sobering. These weren't murder victims. These were people who died from accidents or suicide, drownings, a woman who jumped from a bridge, a fisherman who'd been missing since 1987, a young man who disappeared in 2016, people who'd gone into the water for various tragic reasons and whose bodies had never been recovered, until their feet showed up on shore. The coroner's office was very clear. Foul play had been ruled out in all the Canadian cases. This wasn't a serial killer. It wasn't organized crime. It was a natural phenomenon that nobody had really noticed before, because shoes
weren't buoyant enough until recently. Barb McClintock, a spokeswoman for the BC Coroner's Service, stated it directly. "We found there is nothing suspicious in any of them." But why did it suddenly become a phenomenon in 2007? Shoes have been getting lighter for decades. People have been drowning in the Salish Sea for as long as people have been here. So why the sudden cluster?
Part of the answer is awareness. Once the first few feet were found and media coverage exploded, people started looking. Beachcombers who might have walked past a shoe before now stopped to check. The phenomena became famous, so more discoveries got reported. There's also the fact that more people have been living around the Salish Sea in recent decades. More people on beaches means more chance of finding things.
The statistical clustering might also just be coincidence. People drown in the Salish Sea every year. If you've got bodies on the sea floor in various stages of decomposition and conditions are right for feet to detach and float up, you might just get several discoveries in a relatively short time, followed by quieter periods. One case does remain suspicious. Antonio Neal disappeared in December 2016.
He was 22, struggling with addiction. A boot containing his foot was found years later on Jedediah Island in Everett, Washington. His mother says there are unanswered questions about the circumstances of his disappearance. But even in cases where the death itself might be suspicious, there's no evidence the foot washing ashore is anything other than natural post-mortem processes.
the Salish Sea feet became a cultural phenomenon. There's
a Wikipedia page dedicated just to tracking them. TV shows used them for plot lines. The crime show Bones did an episode. Rizzolian Isles referenced them. Podcasts covered them. The mystery captured public imagination because it seems so bizarre and so specific. Human feet? In shoes. Just feet, nothing else. Washing up in one particular area. It sounds like fiction. It sounds like something a crime
writer would invent. But it's real. And the explanation, while scientific and logical, is kind of eerie. What the Salish Sea feet really represent is a reminder about the ocean. The ocean keeps secrets. Bodies that go into the water don't always come back. Families spend years not knowing what happened to missing loved ones. And then one day, a piece of evidence washes ashore. For some families,
finding a foot brought closure. DNA identification meant they finally knew for certain their missing relative had died. They could stop wondering. They could grieve properly. Tanya Janiec, an identification analyst with the BC Coroner's Service, talks about how meaningful it is to bring that closure to families. Starting with just a foot or bones and being able to say, "This is so-and-so," gives families answers they desperately
need. The phenomenon also shows us we're still figuring out the ocean. We like to think we understand our environment completely, but oceans are vast and complex. The fact that we didn't predict feet would start washing ashore when shoe design changed tells us we still have a lot to learn. Oceanographer Parker McCready notes that objects floating on the surface behave differently than we might expect. Wind
matters more than currents for small floating objects. The specific geography of the Salish Sea creates unusual conditions. So when you hear about the Salish Sea feet mystery, remember it's not actually a mystery anymore. Scientists solved it. It's decomposition, plus modern shoes, plus specific oceanographic conditions. But it remains unsettling because it confronts us with uncomfortable truths. People die in the ocean. Bodies decompose in ways we